What happens when a duchess meets one of television's most unfiltered interviewers? What was supposed to be a thoughtful exchange about purpose and philanthropy spiraled into one of the most talked-about televised clashes of the year. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, walked into the studio for an appearance on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and left the set just 19 minutes later, followed by stunned silence and a flurry of online reaction. Let's take you inside the interview that shocked millions. The studio buzzed with Friday night energy. Bill Maher stood backstage in his trademark black blazer, arms folded, watching the monitors like a lion waiting for the moment to pounce. The audience was packed. Lights dimmed. Applause signaled the opening monologue. And then came the line that changed everything. "Please welcome Meghan Markle." She stepped out, composed and radiant, dressed in a sleek black pantsuit and subtle gold accessories. Her wave was regal, her smile flawless, her walk confident, but guarded. Meghan took her seat across from Bill and crossed her legs with intention. "Meghan," Bill greeted, his voice warm but laced with his signature bite, "you've gone from palace corridors to podcast studios. Quite the journey." Meghan responded calmly, "Well, Bill, I'd say I've simply traded old forms of power for new forms of purpose." The audience laughed lightly. Bill smirked. "And yet, you've managed to stay in every headline from London to Los Angeles. Is that intentional, or just very convenient?" There was a slight pause. Meghan's smile remained, but it was tighter now. Her tone cool. "You don't have to chase attention when it chases you." Bill leaned in. "True. But people also say you left a golden cage and walked into a platinum spotlight. Any regrets?" "No regrets," Meghan replied firmly. "Only growth. Some cages have velvet bars, Bill." The crowd reacted. Some gasped, others clapped. Bill nodded slowly, sensing the weight of the words. Then came the shift. "But come on," Bill said, his eyes gleaming. "You must have known, marrying into a monarchy, then walking away and criticizing it publicly, you were lighting a fuse." Meghan didn't flinch. "I used my voice," she said. "Which apparently is more dangerous than silence." "Or more profitable," Bill snapped. The tension cracked like thunder. The studio, once buzzing with laughter, now sat in silence. Meghan's jaw set. She looked him straight in the eye. "Profit from pain is what tabloids do. I don't sell stories, I share truths." "And yet," Bill countered, "from Oprah to Netflix to Spotify, truth has become quite the brand for you." Meghan's voice hardened. "What you call branding, I call reclaiming a narrative hijacked by the British press and people like you, men who profit off skepticism and smirks." "Touché," Bill said, smiling. "But if you dish it, you gotta take it. So let me ask, when you left the royal family, did you consider how that felt to them? Or was it only about Meghan's Liberation Day?" A beat. Meghan blinked once, slow, deliberate. "You know what's funny," she said. "Everyone asks if we hurt the monarchy. But no one asks how the monarchy hurt us." The room was frozen. Even Bill paused. "So, it's all trauma and no accountability," he said, folding his hands. "No, Bill. It's all survival and no apology," Meghan replied, her voice like ice. The tension was now unbearable. "And speaking of survival," Bill said with a wicked smile, "any plans to let Harry do an interview without being edited, filtered, or, let's face it, supervised?" That was it. Meghan's face stilled. Her spine straightened. She looked at him like a queen, not a guest. "You don't get to poke at my marriage to score airtime, Bill." Bill raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe don't make your marriage a media enterprise." Meghan stood up. The audience gasped as her microphone thumped lightly against the chair. She turned to the crew. "I think we're done here." Producers scrambled. Bill leaned back, his smugness momentarily shaken. Meghan walked off stage with measured steps, never looking back. Silence. For the first time in years, Bill Maher sat speechless on live television. Then, faint applause. Not for him, but for her. "Family is complicated," Meghan said, her voice clipped but still measured. "And sometimes you have to make choices to protect your own mental health and well-being. I don't expect everyone to understand that, but I do expect respect for that decision." Bill Maher tilted his head, his smirk sharpening like a blade. Sure, sure. Mental health. Very popular these days. But you can see how it looks, right? You left the royal family, sat down with Oprah and basically scorched the earth, signed a multi-million-dollar Netflix deal, and now you're here telling your version of events. That's not just protecting your peace. That's managing your image. And hey, that's fine. But let's not pretend it's all some noble crusade. There were audible murmurs from the audience, some gasps, a few stifled chuckles. The air in the studio was growing thick, like a thunderstorm brewing behind the cameras. Meghan crossed her legs and leaned forward slightly. Her eyes narrowed with a precise intensity. I think it's telling, Bill, that you reduce my lived experience to a crusade or PR campaign. You don't seem to grasp the human cost behind the decisions I had to make. Oh, I grasp it, Bill fired back, almost too quickly. But you seem to think you were the only one paying that cost. What about Harry's family? What about the British people? You painted a 1,000-year-old institution as the villain in your Hollywood story. Was everyone just out to get you? Meghan's calm started to fracture. Her practiced poise held, but just barely. Being honest about what happened to me doesn't make me responsible for other people's guilt or discomfort, she said, her voice tight. Bill raised his eyebrows slightly. So you don't take any responsibility? Not for how messy it got. I take responsibility for choosing myself, for choosing my family, for refusing to stay in a system that was toxic to my identity and to my dignity. That's what I own. That's what I stand by. Polite applause echoed from a section of the audience. But Bill wasn't finished. He leaned forward, his tone shifting. Sharper. Hungrier. All right. Let's talk about Harry, then. What do you say to the people, because there are a lot, who believe you pulled him away from his family? That you isolated him? That you, let's say it plainly, took him hostage? The words hung in the air like a slap. Meghan's eyes widened for half a second, then narrowed. Her voice dropped a register. I would say those people clearly don't understand Harry. He's not some helpless prince trapped in a tower. He's a grown man with convictions, with a conscience, and with his own trauma. Suggesting otherwise isn't just sexist, it's insulting. Sexist. Bill raised an eyebrow, playing innocent. Meghan leaned in. Yes, sexist. You don't get to frame me as some manipulative woman who dragged him out of a castle just because you can't imagine a man making choices for himself. This time, the crowd clapped louder. A few even whistled. But the tension hadn't broken, it had only shifted. Bill waited until the noise subsided. Then, casually, almost offhand. Fair enough. But if we're playing the honesty game, do you really believe you can walk away from the monarchy and then cash in on it at the same time? Or is that just hypocrisy with better branding? Meghan actually laughed, but there was no joy in it. It was sharp, clean, surgical. You're really obsessed with the idea that my entire life is transactional, aren't you? I'm just saying, Bill replied, voice low and pointed. If it quacks like a duck, Duchess. A loud gasp broke from the audience. Meghan froze, then offered a smile so cold it could frost glass. And I suppose you'd know all about ducks, Bill. You certainly quack enough. The room exploded. Half the audience clapped. The rest winced. Bill's smirk faltered, for just a moment, then returned in full, smug force. Oh, we're just getting warmed up, he murmured. By now, it was no longer an interview, it was open sparring. The crowd was split. Every word was a jab. Every reply, a parry. Meghan sat with her back straight, jaw tight, lips like a line drawn in stone. Bill glanced at his cards, then flicked them aside like they were beneath him. Let's pivot, he said, stretching the room's tension like a taut wire. We've talked royalty, duty, drama. Let's rewind to before you were Her Royal Highness. Meghan blinked slowly. If we must. Oh, we must, Bill replied, the predator in his smile returning. Let's talk about suits, about acting, about Hollywood. Because some folks say, you weren't really a great actress. That your fame didn't come from the roles, but from the ring. How do you respond to that? Silence. Not a whisper from the crowd. The question hit like a punch in the chest. Meghan didn't blink. Her voice was sharp and clear. I respond by pointing out that I spent over a decade building a career in an industry that routinely marginalizes women of color. I started from the bottom, literally holding briefcases on game shows, and I climbed. I earned every role I got. I worked harder than most. Bill tilted his head, expression unreadable. Sure, Suits was cute. But let's be honest, it wasn't the crown. The final shot. The needle in the heart. Meghan exhaled. Smiled faintly, this time, not cold. But tired. You know what, Bill? You came into this with your jokes loaded and your assumptions locked. But here's what you don't understand. Your smirks, your labels, your double standards? They're exactly why I walked away. Not from fame. Not from family. But from this. The constant need to justify existing in my own skin. She stood. The crowd was dead silent as her microphone clicked off. We're done. And with that, Meghan Markle turned and walked off the real-time set, heels echoing like thunder. Bill Maher sat still. Hands folded. Eyes slightly narrowed. Huh, he muttered to the cameras. Guess I touched a nerve. He forced a smirk, but the audience didn't laugh this time. No applause. Just the sound of her departure hanging in the air like the final note of a closing piano lid. The lights dimmed. The interview was over. But the fallout? Just beginning. She scoffed, leaning back slightly in her chair. Are you seriously comparing a fictional legal drama to a period piece that glorifies an outdated institution? Laughter rippled through the audience, some cheering her retort. Bill Maher smiled, unfazed. Touché. But my point still stands. You became globally famous, not because of your IMDb credits, but because you married into Buckingham Palace. And then acted like the attention that came with it was some kind of surprise. Meghan crossed her arms, the tension settling deeper into her shoulders. You keep implying I chased fame through marriage. Maybe I just fell in love, Bill. Maybe I didn't expect the world to turn me into a tabloid villain overnight. Bill shrugged as if she were proving his point. Okay, fair. But riddle me this, if acting was your passion, why haven't you gone back to it? Where's the Oscar-worthy comeback? Where's the follow-up role? Or are you just too busy cashing those Spotify checks? That one stung. Meghan's jaw visibly tightened, her fingers curling slightly where they rested on her lap. You don't get to dictate what success looks like for me, she snapped. Maybe I didn't want to return to an industry that constantly judged me for how I looked, how I sounded, or who I married. Bill leaned forward, voice calm but edged like a razor. Or maybe the roles dried up. Maybe, just maybe, Hollywood doesn't reward mediocrity twice. A hush fell over the audience. Meghan inhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. Her voice dropped, icy and direct. You know what I think, Bill? I think you're just bitter. Bitter that women like me still refuse to play nice for men like you. You want a duchess who smiles, nods, and thanks you for the abuse. Well, tough. Bill raised his hand dismissively. Oh, please. Don't flatter yourself. I love opinionated women. What I don't love is narcissistic revisionism. You walked in here with a PR strategy and a persecution complex. And the moment I push back, suddenly I'm the villain. Meghan let out a short laugh, sharp and hollow. Accountability, she scoffed. You think this is accountability? A smug man sneering across a desk, trying to shame a woman for surviving something he'll never understand. Bill's smile widened. No. I think this is a conversation. But you're turning it into a tantrum. There was a low murmur from the crowd. Shock. Discomfort. A few gasps. Meghan's composure cracked. I'm not throwing a tantrum, she snapped, eyes blazing. I'm standing up to condescension wrapped in comedy. Bill chuckled. I'm not being condescending, Meghan. I'm just not buying the Netflix version of events. Meghan leaned forward now, her voice steady but full of steel. Then maybe stop pretending to be a comedian and admit what you really are, a bully with a monologue. The air in the studio shifted. Audible gasps broke out. For the first time that night, Bill's smile faltered, briefly. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen twice against the desk. The silence was volcanic. "You know," he said finally, voice lower, more deliberate, "this was supposed to be civil. You could have said your piece, promoted your causes, defended your choices. But from the moment the cameras rolled, you've been combative." Because your questions were loaded insults, Meghan shot back. They weren't interviews. They were attacks with punchlines. Bill stood. The audience gasped again. "Enough," he said flatly. "I've hosted this show for over 20 years. I've interviewed presidents, philosophers, comedians, activists, even people I deeply disagree with. And I've never had to do this before." Meghan rose to her feet, too. Her eyes narrowed, her voice chillingly calm. "So what is this, Bill? You're kicking me out because I refuse to smile while being insulted on live TV." Bill didn't blink. "No. I'm asking you to leave because this stopped being a conversation and turned into a performance." Gasps turned to stunned silence. Meghan's laugh was low and incredulous. "Wow. So let me get this straight. A man invites a woman onto his platform, grills her with bad faith questions, insults her choices, her marriage, her career, and when she pushes back, she's the problem? Classic." Bill turned toward the camera. "To our viewers, I apologize. We'll be right back with a real conversation." The screen held on them, two figures standing firm, eyes locked. One host who refused to yield. One guest who wouldn't be silenced. The lights didn't dim. The cameras kept rolling. The tension didn't break. This wasn't just another interview. This was a reckoning. Meghan's voice cut through the heavy silence one final time. "You don't get to silence women just because they won't play along. Not anymore." She turned and walked off the stage, shoulders squared, spine straight, heels echoing like punctuation. Bill didn't move. Didn't smile. Didn't speak. The applause never came. The screen slowly faded to black. And just like that, the most controversial interview of the year became an unforgettable moment in television history. The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut. Meghan Markle stood rigid, eyes locked on Bill Maher, her voice trembling not from fear, but fury. "I didn't tear you apart," Bill said, voice calm but loaded. "I asked questions. Questions people have been asking for years. About the monarchy, about your choices, your career. And every time, instead of answering, you deflect. You lash out." Meghan stepped forward, her heels hitting the studio floor like war drums. "Don't you dare lecture me about lashing out, Bill. Your whole shtick, your career, is built on sarcasm and belittling people. Twisting real pain into punchlines, then hiding behind your desk like it makes you brave." Bill leaned in, hands flat on the table, eyes steely. "I am brave. I'm a truth-teller, Meghan. And sometimes the truth hurts. You want the world to believe you're a victim of circumstance, but maybe you're just a victim of your own decisions." That was it. The air cracked. The studio fell into stunned silence. Meghan's face went pale, then red, then hardened like granite. Her jaw set. She started to speak, but caught herself. Instead, she straightened her posture, the Duchess once more. "You arrogant smug," she stopped. "A breath. You don't deserve my words." She pivoted toward the crowd, her voice rising with raw fire. "You all see this, right?" she asked the studio audience, eyes burning. "This is what happens when a woman refuses to shrink, refuses to sit there and be torn apart for entertainment. They call it a meltdown. They say she's unstable, difficult, loud, emotional. They never say that he crossed a line." Bill raised a hand to speak, but she cut through it like a blade. "No, Bill. You don't get the last word this time. You don't get to frame this as you exposing the big bad Duchess. What you did tonight, you exposed yourself." And with that, she ripped off her mic and slapped it on the desk with a sound that echoed across the room like a gavel. "You're welcome." Without looking back, Meghan walked off set, her heels echoing like distant thunder as she disappeared into the wings. The silence was absolute. Not a breath, not a cough. Bill stood motionless for a beat too long, staring at the empty chair across from him. Then, slowly, he exhaled, adjusted his tie, smoothed his jacket. "Well," he began, his trademark smirk faltering just slightly. That was something. A ripple of awkward laughter trickled through the crowd. To our viewers at home, he said, now more measured, we invite guests on this show to have honest conversations, even passionate ones. But when a guest refuses to engage in good faith and instead hijacks the platform for a personal tirade, there has to be a line. He paused. His eyes were tired, but his tone sharp. And that line was tonight. Muted applause. Confused. Divided. Bill raised a hand to quiet it. This is real time, not story time. If you want a monologue, start a podcast. If you want a conversation, sit down and talk. Meghan, wherever you are, I wish you luck. But this, he said, gesturing to the empty seat, this isn't how you lead. He looked off camera, nodded to the crew. We'll be right back. When we return, something a little less royal. The lights dimmed. A low hum of voices swelled in the audience. On social media, hashtags were already trending. TikToks were posting. Comment sections were erupting. People weren't just watching a talk show anymore. They were witnessing a cultural moment. If you were as shocked as the rest of us, hit that like button. Drop a comment. Was Meghan out of line, or did she say what needed to be said? Subscribe for more dramatic moments, deep dives, and behind-the-scenes fallout from today's biggest clashes. Because when truth meets power, sparks fly, and we're here to cover every flame.